Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of All the Places We'll Go show with your hosts, Richie and Mark. Now, look, this is the only place you're going to go to get an authentic and vulnerable point of view from all our guests each week. It's a bit of a bear all and talking about the life's ups and downs. So this morning, I am really excited to introduce you all to a very special guest, Rod Bristow, President of the UK and in charge of global online learning for Pearson, the world's leading education company. Now, I've got to say that I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. I've known Rod for many, many years now, and through this time, perhaps quite even unknowingly, he's played a rather pivotal role in my entrepreneurial journey, in many ways as I try to emulate his strategic vision, foresight, and leadership. Now, he is a man who's had a career that has spanned over 30 years at Pearson, starting out in the publishing trade, but now today sits as a member of the executive committee for the entire group. On a personal note, what I really loved about Rod is that he's always so generous with his time, and he really focuses on the development of others. He's the type of leader that really leads from the front, and it's something that I really admire about him. So welcome to the show, Rod. It's a real pleasure to have you on this morning.
Thank you, Richie. You're very kind.
Absolute pleasure there, Rod, honestly, and it's all true. So look, without further delay, I'm going to hand over to Mark to ask you the first question.
Hi, Rod. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for giving your time. So let's jump in. We were just chatting before about how this COVID experience is a bit surreal and hard to know where's up and where's down. So just tell us a little bit about how the last 4, 5, 6 months have been.
Well, it's been amazing, Mark. And I just reflecting on it, it really has been the sort of the worst of times and the best of times, hasn't it, for many of us? There are some things about just sort of your personal circumstances where you think, actually, I quite like this idea of not having to be on a train or be on a plane. I don't think I've had a Sunday night at home for many years. I mean, I've always been traveling away, even if it's only into London. So that's been nice, actually. I just said to my wife yesterday, I think I've seen you more in the last 6 months than I've seen you in the last 10 years. She didn't seem quite so pleased, I have to admit, but it was interesting. Everything's changed. There have been many pluses to it. But I was also just reflecting with my colleagues in the last few days that I think we're all starting to be driven absolutely crazy by all the kind of end-to-end Zoom, Teams calls that we're doing, probably all working longer hours than we've ever worked, perhaps even more efficiently because every working hour is involved in sort of doing something, meeting-wise or getting a piece of work done rather than traveling. But yeah, it's tough. I think we're all looking forward to trying to find a bit more of a balance, whatever that so-called new normal is going to be. And we're all looking forward. In fact, I'm chairing my first management meeting on Monday in the office. Looking forward to getting back to a bit of that.
Yeah, I had my first time in the office last Friday. Honestly, it wasn't quite the fairy tale, but it was still nonetheless a joy. And you don't get serendipity as much when it's all virtual. So thanks for that as a sort of background context. If we focus in on you and let's start to understand a bit about your career, Rod. So man and boy Pearson. So if you like a lifer, I guess. So can you tell us about how you started out and ended up in Pearson?
Well, it's a funny thing. I mean, the first thing I would just say is that I think I consider myself to be sort of just dead normal. I don't think I'm any different than anybody, and I think my sort of struggles and the way I came into what I do is probably no different than probably most other people. Like most people, certainly at the time when I got a job, most people didn't go to university. Actually, as it happens, I did. So, and I'll come back to why I did, but I did go to university. but I went, I went to a very normal school. My parents were not poor, but certainly not wealthy. And they themselves had actually they were kind of beneficiaries of social mobility through education, which was interesting. Education was always something my mother believed a lot in. Just when I was leaving school to do my A-levels, I was involved in a car accident that left me in hospital for 3 months and meant that I didn't do my A-levels. So I was in hospital over the time for my A-levels, and I went to college, didn't go back to school, went to college to do another year for A-levels, did terribly. But well enough to get into university, because the year before I'd managed to secure, through blagging my way through an interview, an unconditional offer, or actually a very low offer, from an offer that I couldn't fail to achieve the A-levels for. So I did get into university, did a course in psychology, not because I wanted to be a psychologist, but because I thought it would be quite fun and interesting to learn about. And my first job, I would have done anything. It was 1981. I couldn't get a job, I have to say. No one told me what you had to do in interviews. I didn't own a suit. I still remember today wearing my cream jacket and pale blue trousers to all the interviews. And I couldn't work out why no one would give me a second interview, because that was my best clothes at the time that I would use for wear going out in the evening. No one told me, actually, you ought to have a suit. Now, you might say that was pretty stupid not to know. When I did buy a suit, I found that I was starting to get the odd second interview. What I wanted to do ideally, and all the interviews I was doing, there was just a massive range, everything from engineering to marketing to sales, you name it, I was applying for it, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted a job. I got 2 second interviews, one working in an advertising agency, which I really wanted, because I knew that if you worked in an advertising agency, you drove a Porsche. Everyone that worked in advertising drove Porsches. They all earned loads of money, and they didn't really seem to do a great deal of work, as far as I could tell. So that seemed particularly appealing. But I went to an interview for a job to be a sales rep, and it was for a publishing company. When I got there, it was in a small room in a old building that this company had moved into. They were setting up an office in the UK and Europe, and the guy that hired me somehow I got along well with him, and he basically offered me the job. And he left within 2 years. So I got a job as a sales rep in publishing, basically. I learned how to sell. They gave very good training, and I learned so much more in that job than I'd learned in my entire education about everything. I learned I enjoyed it. And when he left, they asked me if I would take over his role. So I was 24 years old, and I was effectively the general manager for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa for a small, very small. We had 5 people. We had an outsourced distributor and all of that. I was then offered a job. I was then headhunted after that to go and work for a company that was later bought by Pearson, to be in effect the managing director when I was, I don't know, 27, 28 years old, something like that. I was incredibly lucky. I mean, it was just the most incredibly lucky thing. And after that, I got to do lots of different jobs. And that's thanks to being bought by Pearson. That was another stroke of luck. Had we not been bought by Pearson, I wouldn't work for an organization that had so much diversity and so much opportunity within it. And I've had the most interesting career. I'm still having the most interesting career. And every year it seems to just get a little bit better. So, and that's what it's been like for the last 30 years. I've just been given one opportunity after another. And it's all feels a bit fortuitous. I have to say, zero planning. So that's not a good example, is it?
Well, look, Rod, you've given us a couple of nuggets here. The first one, there's a couple of people from ad agencies on, and I wonder if they are driving Porsches today and making lots of money. So that'd be good to kind of see on that. But I think for me, one of the key skills that you mentioned was around sales. And I think I'd love to get your reflections on, the extent to which that key skill is essential in perhaps what you're doing today, but also in what some of the key careers that people watching would be involved in as well.
It's a great point. It was for me. I'll say that it was for me. And when I got that first job in sales, I remember, because I was still in touch with my sort of university lecturers and friends from university, I remember sort of going back and seeing them in the pub afterwards and getting sort of nods of sympathetic approval for what I was doing, that they were sure it would all turn out okay in the end, because sales was not really the sort of thing they'd expected one of their graduates to sort of go into, and but they appreciated that it was hard to get a job at the time. So it wasn't a job that most people thought then was a great job to have, but it turned out to be the best job you could ever have from my point of view. I mean, the learning in there about, because the art of selling is essentially listening, and there's a bit of talking involved, but mostly it's how to listen to people, and mostly it's how to understand what they want and what they need. And once you've understood that, as long as you can go some way towards giving them what they need, and how to be confident enough to sort of suggest that you are able to give them what you need, then you can take it from there. So that idea of listening, which is fundamentally at the heart of any successful business, and indeed any product, because the best products are based on the listening you've done to understand what your customers want. And if you're able to translate what you've heard into the thing that they want, which is essentially what salespeople do, you'll succeed. And that art of knowing what people want is the art of business, as far as I can see.
So fascinating. And that's the intersection between sales and marketing in the end, isn't it? Which is about that sort of the listening, and they are cousins, not always bedfellows, but cousins. Rod, it strikes me just even already, you're very humble. You say normal, but that probably makes you a little bit abnormal, because many people, sort of very political to get to very senior positions. How do you think about politics in a work context?
Well, of course, it has a very negative connotation, just to say the obvious. Most people don't like politics in the workplace. It depends what you mean by politics. If you mean the politics of personal ambition and how to, claw your way up through influence on others, even sometimes at the expense of others, that's a very bad, very corrosive thing. I suppose if you think about politics a bit more positively, that it's about leadership and influence, and how you can make the whole organization better through your leadership and influence, then it's an incredibly good thing. I think it's the spirit of the generosity with which you approach the endeavor that you're engaged in, and it's one of the things I've learned over time, is that most people see through people who are only personally ambitious. Not always, I have to say. Life's a funny thing, isn't it? Sometimes the people who you think least deserve it get the most accolades. But I'm an optimist. I think the right way to approach life is to do your best for the organization that you work for, show your contribution to it. Of course, be proud of what you've contributed, but it's important that you are helping the team that you're in, I think, too. And if you're using politics in that way, i.e. leadership and influence, that's good. If you're using it only for your own personal ambition, it's probably pretty bad.
Great message.
I love it. Absolutely. Rod, I'd like to ask you a question around the development of a personal brand, because it feels like, you know, what you describe is, you know, the way you describe your career is very much a consequence of a bit of salesmanship, a bit of listening, and of course the cousin of marketing. And personally, to get to that position, how did you, or can you foster, or do you need to foster a personal brand? How do you do it? What are some of the key lessons there?
It's the thing I've been the least good at. So I'm not the best teacher. Well, actually, it's for others to judge, isn't it? Let me put it that way. I've never felt very good at it. I don't know, other people might say that I've done a good job at it. I've never tried to do it. I've always tried to be myself. For me, the most important thing is to be true, is to be, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but to be true to yourself is really important. You have to have some principles. You have to know what you want. You know, you've got to stand up for the thing you think is the right thing. You've got to know where you're going to draw a line on something and not concede a point. You've got to know where you're willing to concede everything. But that truth to yourself really matters. I've never felt particularly good at building a brand, and I've never put any investment into it. And if I'm completely honest about it, I probably haven't done a great, you know, I don't think I have done a particularly good job at that. And there are probably others who are more naturally gifted at how they present. It is how you present. I've learned to do it better. I think I've learned to do it better. I've understood, I think it is important for people to understand that sometimes it's not what you say, it's also how you say it and stuff like that really does count. I've probably the mistakes I've made has been thinking that as long as I've said the right thing, everyone will have heard it. Doesn't always work that way.
I'm sure in your time you've had some real highs and lows, and that's sort of really the theme of this particular web show that Richie and I do. So perhaps your greatest triumph and your lowest ebb?
If I'm completely honest, I've always, I said this to my kids the other day and they couldn't believe what I said. I've always had the sort of view that I'm probably about to get fired. So, and it's probably I don't know, maybe it is a kind of an insecurity. I'm not sure. You know, do you really think that you deserve to be in the role that you're doing? So the fact that I'm still here, that's a bit of a triumph. Still going, still here, still making a contribution, still surviving. Actually, that's easy to I think for anybody, actually. Sometimes life's a bit like that. Just getting through stuff, you know, in very difficult circumstances. We should sometimes celebrate that, because life is never easy for anybody. Look, there have been a few episodes I could point at where, you know, I was at the brink of extinction and just managed to kind of swing it back. Maybe they were triumphs. If I really think about the thing I'm the most pleased about, though, it's probably not work, because I've never thought that working is the be all and end all. My family might find that hard to believe, but I really don't. You know, I've only ever worked because probably as time's gone on, I've enjoyed it more, frankly. I think I do enjoy work more now than I used to, but I've never really thought I was doing it because I loved it. I have to admit, I probably did it more because I thought I wanted to, you know, to support my family and actually, you know, my family is probably my biggest triumph. I'm very proud of, you know, proud of my kids, my wife. You know, I'm proud of what we, you know, the fact that we've got a close family, and I like to think a family that's where we support each other and all of that. So that matters the most, actually. I think for me is the sort of family side of things. Yeah, it's if I have a triumph, it's and the one I look back on, it will be that much more than anything I've achieved from a career point of view.
Love that, Rod. But I know that you will be a mentor to many, many people, and they'll look up to you as I do. But what has the role of mentors played in your life and in your career?
Yeah, it's a bit, this mentoring and learning thing is I once went to into the guy that was doing a lot of building work for us here. I went to see him at his house, and I thought, oh my God, you really need a builder. I mean, his house was in a terrible state, and sometimes I sort of think a little bit about myself. You know, I'm advocating learning, development, and all of that, and I probably never think about it very much for myself. I find it difficult to look in a work setting and say, oh, that person. I mean, I've learned a huge amount from. Actually, I've learned a huge amount from everybody I've worked for. I can't think of anyone I've worked for that I've not learned a lot from, actually. But I wouldn't pick any one of them and say, well, I particularly learned more from that person than another person. I did, though. I remember once, early in my career, I invited my boss. He was actually over from the US, and he was free on the weekend. He came and stayed at my house, and I took him round to see, I don't know why did I do this? I took him round to see my parents. And my mother spoke to him, and he was very nice to help me. He would tell my mother how wonderful I was and all this kind of thing. And she said, well, you know why? He's the only one of my children who's done everything his mother's told him to. And I just wish the ground would open up, because the last thing you want your boss to hear is that you're only, you know, you basically just done what your mother tells you to do. But the truth is, I did. You know, I remember she taught me to read, and I still remember to this day. Probably the one thing that gave me the biggest start in life was that when I got to school, I could read, and I do remember still to this day very clearly, it's a horrible thing, but I could read better than the other kids in my class. But it was only because my mother had taught me and spent hours teaching me phonics and the basics of how to read. She was always a strong influence. She never told me what she expected of me, but I kind of knew that she would like me to do well. So that was a motivation. And the final thing, although she expected all of those things, when I did start, you know, working really, really, and I did work, and by the way, you have to work hard. So I was working very hard, to the extent probably I wasn't home that much, and she knew it. And she once said to me, you know what, you're working way too hard. You're caring about the wrong things. And she looked at my young children and pointed at them and said, that's what you should care about, not the work you're doing as much as what you do. So she did help me keep things in perspective a bit too, because sometimes you go, especially when you're paranoid, which I've always been, it can drive you to work ridiculous amounts to the extent that you shut out other parts of your life. So yeah, she helped me with that.
Yeah, it is easy to drift into being obsessed about the wrong things. Let's change tack a little bit in terms of obviously Pearson is extremely high regard in the learning space, but the learning space has evolved a lot in recent times. And so How do you frame the transformation that learning is going through in these times?
Well, here's the funny thing. I mean, when I started off in publishing, it was the best thing to be in because the industry was growing and it was kind of all ships rise. If you can do really well and do better than everyone else, then you become a bit of a hero. But the internet changed it all. The publishing industry has been, in education terms, has been quite hard hit by the effect of the internet, the ubiquity of content and all of that. But of course, it's fueling another, there's been 50 years of growth in publishing. And we've now got at least another 50 years, 100 years of growth ahead of us in a whole new genre of learning and education. And that is education that is delivered online. Look, we're doing this online. The work is moving online. COVID has accelerated all of that. Education is the same. Education is moving online. It's been happening for 20 years. It's now accelerated. So it's the most incredible growth opportunity. It's education's biggest growth opportunity is online learning. And I'm very lucky because I'm working for the world's leading learning company, leading the online learning business for Pearson. So again, I can't believe my luck. It's just the way things have worked out. And it's very exciting. I've never been more excited about the job I've been doing than I've been doing now, and more optimistic about the future. We have the most incredible opportunity to make a difference to people's lives in ways we could never have dreamt of before, to help solve problems of social disadvantage, inequity, and it's a fantastic opportunity commercially as well as in social impact terms.
Rod, I didn't know your story about university and how you got in, and a bit of the ups and downs around that. So that's really fascinating. Now, clearly the role of university and education in that context is rapidly evolving as well. So how do you see, what's your take on university education today versus the many alternatives that are sort of available for young people or even people doing lifelong learning?
So I think the first thing I'll say is university is good. There are plenty of people out there who are saying, university is no longer the thing, it's too expensive, too many people go to university. We've heard that for years. The kind of people that say that too many people go to university are normally talking about the kids of other people, not their own. And university is good. The university has an incredibly important role to play. Higher education is very positive. The fact of the matter, though, is university or higher education now needs to be accessed in many different ways because people's lives require it to be accessed in many different ways. And so that's what's changing. And also people do care more about, I said when I went to university, I had no idea what career I wanted. I did know that I would like to have a good life, and I thought university would help me get a better job. I did think that. I did think, from an earnings point of view, I would do better if I went to university than if I didn't. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think today people are a bit more focused on what they might want to do. And so they see education somewhat more pragmatically than they did. This idea of employability matters much more than it used to do. So therefore, universities have an opportunity to respond to this idea of employability and to think about what learning can best suit different career paths that people would like to have. So there's a wonderful opportunity for higher education at the moment. But there's also a great opportunity for things that you wouldn't consider higher education. Doing shorter courses that maybe aren't thought of traditionally as higher education. But then we are going to see those recognized by higher education too. It's been happening for years. Universities recognizing more professionally certified courses. Even the course I did, psychology, nowadays, most psychology degrees would have some sort of official professional certification from the British Psychological Society. Because that then becomes a professional accreditation, and it's recognized if you want to be a psychologist. So it's a lot more now, it's a lot more career focused now. And I think that's a good thing, because a lot of money and a lot of time goes into education. It's perfectly right. People should be thinking about, well, what am I going to get from it? It's not just that I'll like it, but I want something from it even more than that. So that's what's happening with the university. It's becoming a bit more career focused, a bit more employability focused. It's becoming a bit more breaking it up into smaller pieces, delivering it in different ways, certainly delivering it online.
Yeah. So
it's a good thing. It's happening. There's a lot of good things happening. I think more people will access higher education today, 50%, that's going to grow. More people will access it. They might not do the whole thing all at once. They might do some and come back later. But yeah, the future of higher education and universities is very good, but universities, like all of us, are going to have to change to meet what those changing needs are.
Rod, I'm going to dip into the Q&A bank. I've got a question from somebody. It says, what are the ways in which you would see online learning helping society overall? You mentioned wider access. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so look, on the basics of it, it does give more flexibility of access, obviously. If you don't have to go to a place, but you can do it anywhere, you're bound by definition to have a greater flexibility of access. And for people that are working, also there are plenty of families where their children don't want to go and stay away. In some cultures, going away to residentially to live on campus is not what people want. So I think that flexibility really matters, so that it does improve access. But there are other benefits, and I think these are the ones that tend to be overlooked. There's the idea that if you're studying online, well, that's probably not as good as studying in a classroom, because your teacher won't be able to tell whether you're learning anything. That interaction with the teacher really matters. Well, to an extent, but if you are in a university in a lecture hall with 500 other people, I'm not sure if the person at the front really knows how much each one of those 500 people has taken in everything that they've said. And even a school teacher in a class of 30 kids probably doesn't know the 5 kids in the classroom that just had no idea what they were talking about. Technology does give an opportunity for a teacher to build a stronger relationship, a better relationship, a more insightful relationship with learners than can be done in a classroom. It's not a panacea, but it has got some benefits. So that relationship idea using assessment is huge, and technology can afford a real benefit. But there's another side to this too. And I remember when I was actually last year on the campus of a very big US university, one of our partners in the US, talking to some of the faculty about their experience of teachers on some of the programs that we were working with them on. And one of them made a comment which stayed with me. And she said, the kind of people, and these are a range of could be as young as 18, 19, although many of them are sort of young adults. She said the kind of people that we are teaching are often the kind of people that will never come on campus. They won't feel comfortable sitting in a class of, frankly, largely middle class white kids where there's a relative high degree of homogeneity in that class. They might not feel so comfortable. They might actually feel more comfortable studying in a different environment where they can build that relationship. And it's true that different people want different things from how they learn. for whatever reason. Sometimes it might be background. There are lots of reasons why. So this idea of inclusion, I think, really matters. And I think online can afford a greater degree of inclusion. It's not that it's better, it's that it might appeal to some more than other modalities. And we need to meet people where they are, you know, and that's where online can really help. So online actually can reach people more and more meaningful ways, potentially. And then finally, let's not forget, because work has moved online, some of the skills you need in work, including what we're doing today, the way that you influence, the way you work with others online, the digital skills that you need to acquire, these lend themselves quite well sometimes to an online environment too. So these are the reasons why online learning is going to continue to grow very strongly for many, many, many years ahead. And it's the reason why online learning is education's biggest growth opportunity, is that there are loads of benefits that we're only just beginning to see, but it does need to be good. The fact that it's online doesn't make it good. Just like the fact that you have a physical classroom doesn't make it good. You need a good teacher. The teacher matters. You need a good pedagogy. You need good resources. You need a good experience. And all of those things need very careful design, very careful thinking, very careful collaboration. And that's why, for us, it's a great opportunity, because that's what we do. In Pearson, we connect with the connective tissue in that ecosystem of universities, employers, students. We help bring things together. We build things, we listen, we give people what they need, and ultimately that focus on the learner and direct to consumer. Direct to consumer, let's not forget that. It's not the history of our company, it's not the history of our industry, but it's the future.
I love that thinking, by the way, Rod. And actually, interestingly, many sectors and industries that traditionally were not going D2C are completely going down that road. I mean, FMCG, for example, some of the big organizations from PepsiCo to Unilever are all galvanizing on the B2C opportunity because of the direct relationship that it can foster with the consumer there. Interestingly, the Da Vinci Institute talked about that the internet, that the largest company on the internet is going to be an education company by the year 2030. You've probably seen the report. So I suspect that we're sitting in a good spot over here. But I guess like things like, say, the music space, where there was a disruption maybe 10, 15 years ago with Napster coming in and then the evolution taking place. I suspect learning is going through a very similar evolution as we move on to this online sort of mode to understand how we can deliver these solutions cost effectively and make a profit. Do you think we've figured out the model of how this online thing is going to work in the future?
Well, that's a big question. I don't think I think anyone that says we've got it figured out is taking a big risk of complacency. That said, I think we can see, I think we can see where things are going. So the business I'm responsible for, which is a very significant part of what we do in Pearson already and growing double digits, we're providing the end-to-end, so we're not just providing the courseware, the thing that's going to help the teacher in a broader experience. We're doing our best to provide the broader experience. So you'll sign up to a program. Could be a virtual school. We operate virtual schools. We've got over 100,000 kids in the United States. We're just expanding internationally, whose parents enroll their children in our fully online school. We've got hundreds of thousands of students. We're serving in higher education, where we also outreach directly to them and enroll them directly onto the programs. We partner on the delivery with our universities. These, they have a certificate at the end. They give you currency. They give you something that's going to help you progress in some way. So that sort of more end-to-end vision is where the opportunity lies. And then the thing that we need to figure out is how we partner with others to deliver it. So we're never going to do, no one organization in education will do absolutely everything. If you try and, you know, education is a, you know, hundreds of trillions of dollar industry globally. It's a massive, massive endeavor. It's part of life, really. For one organization to say we're going to corner the market in education is ridiculous. But I think the opportunity to define, you know, to be at the heart of the ecosystem, to bring a greater breadth of capability assets than any other organization can do. We are very lucky in Pearson. We have the most wonderful assets, capabilities, and people who understand education deeply and who understand how working with universities, with schools, and all of that. We can see the way forward. We know that it's digital, of course, it's online. We know that working directly with consumers is going to be critical. Even where we actually have a B2B relationship, it's always in pursuit, it's always in service of the learner anyway. And the more our B2B partners see that we're serving learners, the more they will want to work with us, because that's what they want too. So a relentless focus on the learner and on the consumer is absolutely critical to all of this.
So, Rod, it has flown by. I don't know where the time's gone. We're very nearly at the end. I did want to ask just one question for your view. So, for people thinking about planning their careers, you said, you know, you didn't plan. But what advice would you give? What are the top couple of things you'd advise people if they think about framing and shaping their careers?
The single most important is the thing I tell everybody, and one I have followed it. So I've not planned, but I have followed this principle. I have, despite what I said earlier about working too hard, I've loved every minute of everything I've done. And the reason why I have worked hard isn't because I've thought working hard is a good thing. It's because I've loved what I do, and I've ended up working hard. You tend to be good at the things that you love, and you tend to be not very good at the things that you don't love. So do what you love. I mean, really make sure you can internalize that feeling of getting something from it. Somebody once said to me, I don't work for you as the boss of my first company I worked for. You don't work for me, I work for you. Make the company, make your job work for you, make it give you something. Second, have a bit of lightness and sense of humor. I think it matters because your colleagues will appreciate it, and your colleagues are always important because it's very often, and when you look back on what you've done, it's just as important that it's not what you've achieved, and we can all feel proud of milestones in our careers and things that we've done, but it's how you've done it. And I think when you start to look back, you start to reflect more, not just on what you did, but how you did it and how that's impacted on others. So that's worth keeping in mind. How you do what you do is very often as important as what you do.
Thank you, Rod. They're lovely closing messages. I'll take away, love what you do what you love. That's a great message to everybody. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. I think you are a great example of good things happen to good people. So it's been lovely to have you on. And I know Richie will want to say a few words as well. Just before I hand over to Richie for a close, just a heads up for next week, on the show we have Claudine Collins. Claudine Collins is a wonderful person, another wonderful person who by day is Chief Client Officer at Mediacom UK, which is the largest media planning buying agency in the UK, but has much, much more to her than that, including side hustles of being on the interview panel of the final stages of The Apprentice for the last few years, and many other varied charity activities. So please join us next week to hear Claudine's fascinating leadership journey. Richie, do you want to say a final word?
All I can really leave us with is just a massive thank you, Rod. It's been such an amazing pleasure to have you on this morning. I knew it would be, but I just loved your candidness about it. And the, you know, the honesty that you brought to this conversation is really something that's going to stay with me. So I just want to say thank you really for your time.
I've loved being part of it. Thank you for inviting me, Richie and Mark. Thank you very much. I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic, and I've got to say I'm excited about next week. I'll be joining. I'll be listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Rod, just hold fire for a minute. Thank you, everybody else. If you all drop off, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Good weekends.